All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig and a Pickle Crew Show with a little 49er video. What is the latest with Jauan Jennings as the cut down to 53 looms on Tuesday the 26th? We're just days away from that. What is going on with JJ? We'll talk about it coming up next. First, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. All right, let's talk a little bit about the latest on Jauan Jennings. Tim Kawakami is reporting that Jennings could be placed on IR if his calf injury / contract stare down is not resolved here in the next coming days. In fact, there's a quote: "There is growing frustration on both sides as Jennings continues to miss practice with a calf injury, and the 49ers management continues to show little interest in restructuring his contract and giving him a big pay raise for the second time in a little over a year." So obviously Jennings is coming off a career year. He feels like he's got the Niners over a barrel. Because he has leverage, he thinks, because they don't have any other receivers, which is true. And now the injuries only exacerbate that situation. But I don't get the sense, that the 49ers seem too motivated to satisfy Jauan Jennings. To me, there's really three options. You can pay Jauan Jennings. He's got a contract this year for $7.5 million, but you could rip that up or somehow try to give him some incentives that would make him, have more money at the end of the year. You could do that. You could try to, I don't think he wants an extension that goes beyond March because it will take him out of the free agent market. And I don't think the Niners want to necessarily change the base pay. But if you want to funnel him a few more dollars, but to me, there's a price that comes with that. You're not doing that for Colton McKivitz. And in a lot of ways, these are two starting guys in your offense. One's a lineman, one's a receiver, that are both headed towards free agency at the end of the year. So to me, I think you're going to have some issues in your locker room if you pay JJ and don't pay McKivitz. So that's one. But your first option, if you're the 49ers, is pay him. I don't think they have any kind of short-term, deal that they can make. But if you wanted to give him a big money, long-term extension, buy out his free agency next March, Rosenhaus, if you gave him a long enough deal for enough money, he would probably say, yeah, we'll sign that. We'll sign that. So if paying JJ, it's a lot more complicated than it appears. Paying him, extending him, to me, it's easy to just go, oh, you know what? Jauan Jennings is a clutch receiver. Pay him. But it's way more complicated than that. So option number one is pay Jauan Jennings. Extend Jauan Jennings. Big money, long-term deal for a guy who's really only had one good year. Before last year, his previous high was like 35 receptions and 400 yards and change. So he hasn't had a long track record with the 49ers of incredible production. He's always been their third receiver. But you could pay him or extend him. That's option one. Option two is you can ignore him and just say, hey, he's got a contract, $7.5 million. And just ignore him. Ignore whatever he says. Ignore his trade demands and just hope that he shows up and that he's a total pro, and that even though you've ignored his trade demands and basically, just said, no, we're not extending you, you're putting it back on him. He's going to show up. That because he's got to get the season to accrue so he can become a free agent next year. Otherwise, he's just in the same situation next year as he's in this year. So he is going to show up. So you do have that knowledge. You have that leverage over JJ if you're the 49ers. He's not going to sit out the year. He's going to show up. So you could just ignore his demands and let him show up and then just hope that he's a pro. Now, he's been a pro up to this point, but, this is easily the biggest dispute he's gotten into with the team. Does he remain a pro throughout the whole year? Or does the fact that you ignored his trade demand and ignored his demand for more money, is he a total pro and he compartmentalized that and just shows up and plays football and everything's the same as usual? Or does he let that bother him? And he seems like the kind of emotional guy that might let it bother him. And then option number 3 is you trade him. You trade him, and that's not what the Niners want to do because they really do like the player quite a bit. He represents so much of what they respect in hard-nosed football players who show up for the W. But now he's at a point in his career he wants to get paid, and I get it. I totally understand where he's coming from. As far as what's going to happen here, Shanahan has said he expects Jauan Jennings to show up week 1, ready to roll. He has not practiced in over a month. If you said, who's the 49ers' best wide receivers without him, they can't field a 5-man wide receiver core right now. Ricky Pearsall, Robbie Chosen, Sky Moore, and Isaiah Hodgins is the best that they can do right now until Jordan Watkins gets healthy. Eventually, I guess you could say Watkins is in that mix, and you'd have Pearsall, Chosen, Moore, Hodgins, and Watkins. But the Niners are down probably multiple wide receivers. That's if they wanted to keep 5. Some teams keep 6. Some teams keep 7. So the Niners are down multiple wide receivers. Kawakami is reporting that Jennings could be placed on IR if they can't come to some kind of resolution. If he's gonna continue to sit out, they're gonna have to put him on a list. They can't go a man short all season just because JJ's situation remains unresolved. So the fact that Tim is reporting that there's growing frustration on both sides, well, you can see the frustration on Jennings' side. On the Niners' side, it's really very subtle. John Lynch stopped by with Murph and Marcus on KMBR, and probably as close as he came to saying anything aggressive was just reminding everybody that it's close to time to play football, and that if you're a football player, you got to kind of get on the field, suggesting that maybe, saying over and over again, hey, we're not trying to send any messages to JJ. We love the player, but it's time to play football. So this undoubtedly is coming to a head. I would say the Niners are going to be in the market for wide receiver trades, and they probably will put in a couple claims on wide receivers waived. We could go into a long list and start throwing names out, but at this point, I think everybody kind of already knows the names. And you could try to make a big trade for a Romeo Doubs, but, is Green Bay going to deal with you? You could try to make a bigger trade for a Terry McLaurin or a Tyreek Hill. But if you can't pay JJ, how are you going to pay those guys? So it's very problematic. You could try to, to me, if you said, what is a solution that you think could be a workable solution? I just think that Jennings probably is more valuable to a Tennessee Titans right now than he is to the 49ers. The 49ers have already paid wide receivers. They don't want another big money wide receiver. The Titans have Cam Ward and a brand new receiving core. If I could get Calvin Ridley, I'd move JJ to the Tennessee Titans. If I could get Alec Ayamanor and some kind of day 3 pick in the 26th draft, I would move JJ to the Titans. To me, JJ in Tennessee makes a lot more sense. They need him going forward. The Niners, the Niners could absolutely use him, but there's no way the Niners want to give another big money extension to a wide receiver. So the timing's all wrong, as Kawakami reported. And now both sides are getting frustrated. Once again, there are 3 options. You pay him, you trade him, or you ignore him. And paying him, I think, is bad business. Ignoring him is super risky. You could blow up all your chemistry in the room, and the whole thing could go really south quite quickly if you try to ignore him and just kind of hope the thing goes away. Or you could trade him. You could trade him. And I don't know what kind of trade market there's going to be for him, but there will be some. Tennessee would be the first team that I would call, but there might be other teams. You look at any team, a Detroit, for example, the Raiders, any team that's trying to establish a run game, a strong run game, Seattle for that matter, I'm not going to trade him to Seattle, but any team that wants to establish a strong run game would love Jauan Jennings. He's one of the best run blocking wide receivers in the sport. The 49ers don't seem like they have the appetite to extend him. They love him, but guess what? Compliments don't spend. So you ignore him, you pay him, or you trade him. And to me, he's the wrong guy to ignore because he's just a powerful presence in the room, and he's very verbal. He could be very unhappy. It could be a major distraction. So I don't think you ignore him. I don't think you pay him because I think it's bad business. So what's left? You trade him. You trade him. And I don't think it's a great thing, but if you could get Calvin Ridley or Alec Ayamanor in a pick, I would do it. All right, leave your comments in the comment section below. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of the Krug Show. Also, special thanks to Claw Daddy Arcades for sponsoring the Krug Show. They've got brand new locations opening in Capitola Mall and Visalia Mall later on this year. And thanks to all of you guys for supporting the Krug Show on YouTube.